for folks that weren't able to attend. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dustin Banks, and I'm the Deputy Operations Project Manager for the Willamette Valley Project and the Rogue Basin projects. So the 13 dams here in the valley that many of which you're all familiar with, and then the 2 projects down in Southern Oregon that the Corps manages as well. I have been in the Willamette Valley for, gosh, since 1993, long time, 32 years almost with the Corps of Engineers in total, and all of that time in operations in one function or another. So very familiar with our landscape, but it's interesting that, continuing to meet people, kind of reconnect with people over our mission. So looking forward to the opportunity today to follow up with you all to provide an update to the National Inventory of Dams database. I think that was one of our commitments, but also be available to talk to you a little bit about our project operations and any other questions that you might have. I'm going to punt it over to my co-presenter today, Mr. Ross Heiner, who is the Northwest Division Dam Safety Program Manager. Ross, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Dustin said I'm Ross Heiner. I'm the Dam Safety Program Manager for the Northwestern Division. That's a new role for me. I was the Dam Safety Program Manager for the Portland District for the previous 5.5 years. So we started the rollout of the new NID, the newly updated NID last winter and fall, working with some of our emergency management partners. So excited to follow up with some of the local stakeholder groups like Live Long Lebanon and folks in Sweet Home area as well to showcase the new NID and answer any questions you might have about the dams in the South San Ym or in the Willamette Valley in general. So back to you, Dustin.
Thanks, Ross. And Wyatt, I don't know who the right person to pick on would be, but we have a few other Corps folks on here, and I was wondering, just for the benefit of those folks or anybody else that might not know, can you talk just a little bit about Live Longer Lebanon and kind of the charter and the purpose behind your group?
For sure. And my apologies, my work laptop does not have a functional webcam, but I do have a functional mic. And Live Longer Lebanon is a community health and wellness group that arose from the ashes of Lebanon's bid to be a Blue Zones community. We decided not to go that route and to do it our own way. And so we created a hub of stakeholders in health and wellness for the Lebanon area. And one of our initiatives is to focus on emergency management preparation because the best way to be healthy is to be ready for everything. And so we have the Emergency Management Committee that seeks to replicate the Live Longer Lebanon format of bringing various stakeholders together to help them collaborate. And a lot of our members are here today, which I'm excited about. And we are very interested in learning more about what USACE is up to and how we should plug in our emergency management plans.
Thank you, Wyatt. I appreciate it. Yeah, boy, if the last few years haven't taught us anything, it's to be prepared for everything. We certainly have had some amazing experiences in the Willamette Valley, the last several years. So, Christy, or Ross, you want to advance to the next slide? So our purpose and intent today is to I always want to start these presentations with just a quick overview of our operating project. Having spent as much time as I have in the Valley, I still run into folks that really aren't aware of the fact that they, likelihood live below or, are protected by any one of several dams within the Willamette Valley. And so we try to take advantage of that a little bit and open that dialogue up. We'll talk a little bit about our dam safety program, which I have been involved in. Ross has been involved in. Christy's been involved in. I think it's something that we feel really excited to explain to people, and something that folks should know. And then we'll get to the specifics of the National Inventory of Dams, the mapping, and what it is and how it can be utilized to improve your risk awareness and how we can support you in that. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well. But feel free to populate or put questions as we go into the chat, And if we don't catch them right away, we'll circle back to them at the end. Okay. Next slide, Ross. So just a quick visual overview of the Willamette Valley project. And it's interesting that we talking about it today. I have a document here that is a 1975 speech that was prepared to brief folks in the South Santiam area about a project that was never constructed up near Cascadia State Park. You know, the original kind of layout for the Willamette Valley projects included 17 dams in total. And of those 17 originally proposed, you see the 13 that we operate and maintain today for a variety of purposes. Built, you know, over several decades and through a series of authorizations and flood control acts, all just a little bit different in terms of their design and how we manage water for the multiple purposes, flood risk management being the most obvious one, but the multiple purposes and benefits that we can achieve through operation of these facilities. We recently commemorated in 2019 what we would consider the 50 years of project operation. So from the time Blue River was completed, the last dam in operation, and then promptly there in that spring of 2019, we had one of the most significant flood events we've had probably since 1996. And you know, it was a strong reminder of the kind of the primary purpose, both of our dams and our operations, but also our dam safety program and how we communicate with folks that do what you all do in the communities. Next slide, Ross. So just a different view of how we're laid out throughout the valley. I've used the term multi-purposes a few times. Obviously, flood risk management is our prime driver, right? The original purpose, that's our life safety mission, and it's a pass-fail mission in a lot of respects. I mentioned 2019, you know, in a span of about 7 days, the operation of these dams prevented about $2 billion of flood damages during a period of the year where we typically don't see heavy rainfall, just a set of unusual conditions for us. But, you know, that number, that downstream risk in terms of infrastructure and population is increasing all the time. And so, you know, the significance of that flood risk management mission and how we manage those risks is increasingly important to all of us. But in addition to, you know, managing for flood risks, obviously the dams themselves have both impacts and benefits to communities. You know, all of the purposes that you see listed there, irrigation, water quality, hydropower, fish and wildlife, and recreation, we work to achieve a balance that maximizes the benefits and keeps us in both legal compliance and minimizes the impacts of operation of our facilities. And in many ways, you know, we are constantly evaluating and trying to improve on that condition. And over the last, you know, several months and over the next few years, we'll be continuing to evaluate and operate this system differently to try to achieve, like I said, both legal compliance, species recovery for listed fish species and other terrestrial species, as well as the benefits to recreation, which are significant, and continuing to produce hydropower and working to improve water quality downstream. It is a complicated system, you know, and the tension and challenges on the system are increasing all the time. But we're constantly working to try to improve on that condition and work to be as transparent as we possibly can and help people understand what those benefits are, what the trade-offs are, and how they can become involved in that process of discussion. Ross, the next slide. I think it's you know, if nothing else, we always try at this time of the year to talk about how we're doing and what's going on with water management. And I will tell you that, you know, less than a month ago, we had a series of drought slides prepared talking about what was really looking to be a very difficult, maybe historically difficult drought situation within the Willamette and the Rogue Basins. And boy, how dramatically things have changed for us. I know it's a little difficult to see probably on the slide, but to the left is a tool that I think I would encourage all of you to become familiar with if you aren't already. and that's the Willamette teacup diagram. It shows current state of our operating projects in terms of storage and where we are in relation to our refill curve or our water control diagram. Any one of those points, whether you see the orange squares or the little orange dam signs or the green squares, if you click on them, there's additional information that shows pool elevation, boat ramp access, the downstream points. Those green squares will change colors to show you whether it's all good, if we're approaching bank full stage, if we're at flood stage. So it's a really useful tool to be able to get a quick snapshot, whether you're going out to recreate or you're watching the rainfall and you're wondering just exactly what's happening, how we're operating the projects and what those conditions are. And we're kind of in a dramatic place right now. I mean, we went from extreme scarcity to across the system having, typically this is the time of the year where we would be looking to be at our kind of peak of conservation storage, so storing as much water as we can for those other authorized purposes and benefits, because the flood risk typically at this time of the year has diminished. But as you all know, over the last few weeks, we were at bank full, above bank full capacity in a few places within the Willamette Valley, which is extremely unusual. And so we do have a conservative refill curve that gives us some latitude to manage these late season May, June type rain events. This year, it's very fortunate. We're going to be, we're going to see storage in places, the kind of the maximum available storage we would have. In other places where you see something look very different, like Cougar being empty, we are working through changes in our operations to try to improve fish passage, through what we would call operational measures. It's a mixture of how we're releasing water through the dams, the timing of that, our reservoir elevations, and then monitoring and evaluating the success of that to do the very best we can to improve condition for listed species. And Foster always looks a little bit unusual because we have this winter drawdown to provide some flood storage. And in this year, we've got a delayed refill to try to address both fish passage and some water quality issues. And then you'll see us using water from Green Peter, which is very full right now, to bring that pool at Foster up to full pool, which provides benefits for recreation and water quality and water supply. Will also allow us to try to move fish in a different way through spill and our spillway gates. So lots of things going on within the South San Juan Basin, but from an overall water storage standpoint, really in a much different and a much more positive place than personally I believe we'd be. I think everybody was really concerned about where we would end up this year, and we've been very fortunate to regain the conservation storage that we have going into the season. Ross, next slide. So the part that I know you are all here to talk about, and boy, I live in Cottage Grove. I live in the Willamette Valley. I live below a dam, right? I raise my children there. And the question we get asked pretty consistently, whether we're at work or I'm in the grocery store, is, are the dams safe? And my answer is always immediate and consistent. And the first answer out of my mouth is yes. And is my next statement. Yes, our dams are safe. And, we never take that fact for granted. The facilities that we have, because of the risk, and Ross will talk a lot more about risk, but you think about the population at risk downstream of our dams, how close we have people living to our facilities, and how immediate some of those impacts would be if there was a failure of some type. It is something that we have an absolute commitment to, and a really robust dam safety program. And if you kind of follow counterclockwise from the little gray box that says operation and maintenance, in my mind, much of what starts and is kind of the foundation of our dam safety program is our operations and maintenance, the folks that are out on our facilities every day, working on equipment, checking instrumentation, making observations. It starts with our operation and maintenance. We have monitoring on all of our facilities. We have consistent and I guess robust is another way of using it, dam safety training program, a series of inspections that happen annually on 5 and 10-year cycles, and then in some ways very specialized features of the project like spillway gates, where we use both the operations and maintenance personnel at the project, engineers from our Portland district, dam safety experts from across the country, and in some cases across the world, to help us work through some of these challenges. And all of that information feeds into very comprehensive, detailed risk assessments. Not do we, are we confident today, but are we confident about all the things we know from history, and how do we piece those together? It is a very, very, very robust, solid, defensible program. And like I said, like you all, I live below one of our dams. I do not go to sleep at night worried about the safety, my safety, or the safety of my family and neighbors. And that doesn't mean that things can't happen, right? Things will happen. We live below a dam. There's inherent risk. We have mechanical, electrical, structural features, and so we always have to be prepared when something happens that we can't predict. And so a big piece of our overall dam safety program is our emergency action planning, the work we do with the communities and the folks like yourselves that have these primary roles in planning for contingencies and taking action when things happen. And boy, have we had an opportunity, not so much from a dam safety standpoint, but with, catastrophic snowstorms, wildfire, floods in the last few years, to really exercise our incident command structures, our communication within our emergency management teams at the county and the state and the federal level. We certainly have sharpened our swords there, but that's always something we're committed to improving on. And all of that at some level translates into, how we assess risk, how we work to diminish that risk over time. And that is where, Ross, I think, is going to take off and talk about how we continually are working to communicate risk and make our program transparent in ways that help you all do your jobs. Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Good overview of the Willamette Valley and kind of all the pieces and components and people that make, operating, maintaining dams, required to make them be safe and continuing to monitor, observe, and study, the risks associated with dams and taking action to make those risks as small as possible. And so, as you said, the operation and maintenance of the facilities is really the heart of the dam safety program, to make sure that they, the components associated with the dams, the gates, the features that control water are reliable, that we know that they will work when they're asked to work to pass flows in the ways that we intend to for all those authorized purposes that you mentioned earlier. Today I'll focus a little bit on the risk assessment process and what we look at in our dam safety risk assessments, how we prioritize activities within a national inventory of dams. So the Corps of Engineers owns and operates over 700 dams across the country. And so they're all, getting older every year, and decisions need to be made on how to invest in that infrastructure smartly, where we're investing dollars where we need to ensure that the structures are reliable, for the next 50 years, 100 years, however long it may be. So the way we look at risk in the dam safety world is in three distinct kind of buckets or components. The first is the hazards. What, as Dustin mentioned, what are the things in the future that might occur that could negatively impact the dam? We know how the dam's performed over the last 50, 60 years, but what kind of conditions might it be exposed to in the future that might um, that might challenge the way the dam will perform. And those include large flood events, beyond what we've seen before, as well as earthquake loadings or seismic events or other hazards that that may occur in the future. And also the routine operation of the dam and the aging infrastructure, the aging components. What are the critical components that require rehabilitation or replacement over time? So time is a hazard that also gets evaluated. Performance, how the dam will perform given those loadings or combinations of events. So in a large flood event that might occur in the future, are the spillway gates reliable to open in a timely fashion to pass that flood through the spillway? What is the earthquake performance in some of the large seismic events that might occur in the future? How will the dam respond and perform given that loading? And what are the things that could go wrong that could result in consequences downstream? And so in our risk assessments, we're primarily focused with the life safety aspects of the risk and what are the human consequences that could occur if something does go wrong. And typically when we're doing these risk assessments, you combine the hazards and performance. We're computing typically very, very small probability events, and associated with those low probability events is sometimes, depending on the size and scale of the dams, fairly large consequences. So there's, all three of these components all contribute to the global risk understanding associated with the dam. And so we have a lot of study and a lot of priority from a national level to evaluate the dams in the Willamette Valley because of their multi-purpose nature, the amount of water that's stored behind the dams during our this time of year to provide that water supply and water quality benefits throughout the dry summers and falls. That amount of stored water combined with the some of the seismic hazards that we face here in Oregon, the Cascadia subduction zone being one of the primary things, means that we have to assess these dams to some very, very unlikely earthquake loadings and scenarios that challenge some of the engineering principles that were included in the original design of the dams. So we're going back as we learn and evaluate the performance of the dams over time, learn more about things like the Cascadia subduction zone and other hazards, better understanding of flood hazards and so forth. We're taking all that new information and reassessing the dams and how they'll perform in those future events, as well as what the risk is associated with them, and how we can address those risks to minimize them to the lowest extent possible. And so part of doing this risk assessment and risk analysis is to take action, either risk management actions that we take at the dams, or and also communicate the risks associated with the dams, the things that we're learning as we go through those assessments. We want to communicate outward. So the National Inventory of Dams is a new platform where we can communicate those findings and the risks associated with the dams. So this is a kind of a new term. There's risk classification is some new terminology that's been included in the new NID update for Corps of Engineers owned dams. And there's a distinction here between hazard potential, which used to be really the way that dams were described on the NID and this new term or risk classification. So there's 3 hazard potentials associated with dams: high, significant, and low. And really, what a high hazard potential dam is one where if there's a failure or misoperation of the dam, it would cause loss of life downstream. And so that sets a standard for inspections and assessments and operation and maintenance standards that must be met. For all of the dams in the Willamette Valley, they are all high hazard dams because of their size and scale and the populations that live downstream. And so that's one distinction. Just because there's a dam might be classified as a high hazard potential, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's high risk. It just means that there's a higher standard that must be applied to the operation and maintenance and the safety program associated with that dam. The new component here on the right, the risk classification, which is included in the new NID, is broken up into 5 categories, from very high risk to very low risk. And those are color-coded there on that graphic. And this is really the result of those risk assessments and how potential modifications to dams are prioritized across the inventory of dams that we own and operate. So you'll see that both of those terms, hazard potential and risk classification, on the NID. And so that hopefully provides some background on what those terms mean there. So the other big component about that's included in the update to the National Inventory of Dams is dam breach inundation maps. And these dam breach inundation maps are used for a number of purposes. One is in our emergency action plans associated with the dams, so that if that worst case scenario were to happen and there was a failure or a breach of the dam, we have an estimate on where and how much water would be released downstream, and the timing associated with that release of water. The maps are also used to estimate the consequences that we evaluate in our risk assessments, and are used to inform local evacuation and response plans. These maps used to be in a static format, kind of as shown on the picture there, these hard copy map books, and they would be labeled with for official use only, and distribution be limited to emergency management agencies and first responders, and they weren't allowed to be distributed to the public. And those hard copy static map books still are just included in our emergency action plans. However, the NID, National Inventory of Dams, does provide a platform to share that information, and that is a change and a new thing that we have put out there into the public forum on the NID platform just within the last few months. So these maps are based on kind of the worst case dam failure scenarios, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So one thing to remember is these are associated with usually very extreme large flood events, and they assume some of the worst case scenarios of how rapidly and widespread a dam breach may be. These maps are not 100-year flooding or associated with any probability of that event occurring. They are not a 1% flood event map that is used to inform flood insurance rates. They are not evacuation or response plans. They need to be built on to develop those at a local level. And they're typically not specific to a specific cause of dam failure. So this kind of summarizes how we've evolved as an agency in really an effort to be more transparent with the the information that we've developed over recent years and in some of the newly updated inundation maps and risk assessments, and moving from kind of these static, closely held dam breach inundation maps to this new platform where the risk information and inundation layers are available to emergency management agencies and the general public. So I've gone through kind of a summary of what goes into a risk assessment in our dam safety world. And these are summarized within the NID in paragraphs of text, which I'll go through here and do a live demonstration of. So let me drag that browser window over, and I'll kind of give a live demonstration of what the new NID looks like. So the URL is pretty straightforward. It's nid.usace.army.mil. We can include that in the chat. It's pretty easy to find on Google or whichever search browser you use. So you'll come to the website initially, and it will it kind of give some information on what the NID is, and really what it is a repository of the over 90,000 dams that exist within the U.S. and its territories. And so there's a search bar here on the opening page, as well as a map down here, so you can explore either with the name of a dam or a location that you want to look for, or click around more graphically to an area that you might be interested, for instance, in Lynn County. Down here, there's a couple of different helpful links where you can learn more about dams. This is kind of pretty helpful, just general terminology of what dams are, why they, general reasons of why they are built, types of owners of dams, different types of dams. So it's a pretty helpful resource that talks about certain things and links to learn more, and also kind of explains through what goes into some of the things we've talked about here already, dam safety programs, hazard potential, risk classifications, and those sorts of things. So a helpful resource there down at the bottom of the home page, as well as some help page and some FAQs as well. So let's get back to the search feature, and we'll just kind of go through the and look for Green Peter Dam. So you can type it in there and click, if you know the dam you're interested in and looking for. You can just type it in, and it'll take you straight to this page, which is a summary page, which outlines some basic information. And really, I kind of see the NID as, in some respects, as a baseball card. I grew up, trading and collecting baseball cards, and you have all the stats, facts, and figures associated with the dam, with a baseball player in that case, but this is kind of a baseball card for a dam, but it's a little bit more interactive. When was the dam constructed? How tall is the dam? How big is the dam? What's the storage of the reservoir behind the dam? And then there's a summary of the risk associated with the dam. And so let's just click on that, and it should take us over to this tab, the risk tab. And what we've done is based on the most recent risk assessment, which in this case is July of 2020, where the risk assessment and risk classification was updated to a 4, or a low risk category. this summary, this first paragraph really explains what went into that risk classification. And so in the case of Green Peter Dam, we talk about, the issue evaluation study that was performed, and the results of that risk assessment to be characterized the dam as a low risk project. What types of scenarios were assessed in that issue evaluation study, that advanced risk assessment, as well as some of the ways that the dam is operated. There's a little bit of background information that explains how the dams are operated. Oh, so the project description. Yeah, going back to this description page is where that kind of that summary of the project is included. And so there's this paragraph here that talks about how the reservoirs are operated through the winter, where they're drawn down to lower elevations to allow for the collection and the temporary storage of rainwaters to reduce peak flows in river stages downstream, and then how in the spring that those reservoir elevations are brought up as rainfall allows to their maximum conservation pool elevations, which we have recently reached at many of the projects in the Willamette Valley over the past couple of weeks. And then how that stored water is used over the summer to meet some of the other authorized purposes. So that's on the description page, and then there's kind of some more facts and figures on the structure tab. We talked about the risk assessment tab here, and I guess what I want to highlight on this page while we're here is some of the scenarios that you'll see when we go into a little bit more detail on the inundation maps. And there's two different layers of maps that are included in the NID. One for non-breach scenarios, non-breach meaning that the dam is operating as intended and passing either low normal flows or during larger flood events. There's maximum high scenarios being the worst case, where this is typically utilizing the entire capacity of the spillway to pass flood flows through the dam safely after that flood storage is exceeded. And this is typically a very low likelihood type of flood scenario, but is at or around the capacity of the spillway as it was originally designed. The other set of maps you'll see are breach scenarios or dam failure scenarios, and this is where it is estimated what the outflow from the dam would be if there were to be a catastrophic failure of the main dam. So in this case, Green Peter being a concrete gravity dam, it would be loss of several of the dam monoliths and a release of water there. There's different scenarios here from normal operations. This normal high scenario, top of active storage is during a moderate level flood event, and then the max high would be the worst case where a dam were to fail in that worst case flood event. And so those are further described here. So I encourage you to go and explore and learn more about those there. So to actually get to the maps, you can utilize this map over here, and there should be a slider bar that makes this a little bit bigger, but those maps, those inundation layers are shown over here. So you can see MH breach is associated with the maximum high breach scenario. That's really the worst case scenario. What these numbers mean is the water elevation behind the dam in in that model. And these models are just estimates of usually with some worst case parameters included of what is an estimate of where water would go in these different scenarios. So we can turn on the normal high breach. So this would be in a sunny day type failure when the reservoir is at or near its normal high elevation, and how much inundation would result in that scenario. So maybe on your computer at home, you'd be able to slide this over and make it the map bigger. But in this case, since that's not working, I'm going to click on this link up here that says View in Advanced Map Viewer. And that's going to open up a new tab and zoom right to the dam we were looking at, in this case, Green Peter. And I'll zoom out to give some context geographically. This map viewer is for most all of the 700 plus dams that the Corps of Engineers owns and operates. So at this time, the only inundation maps that are available on the platform are for Corps of Engineers owned dams, but there are some state agencies and other dam owners that will be uploading their inundation maps to this viewer in the future. So we'll zoom back into Green Peter Dam here, and we'll click on that, and we'll pull up that same scenario, the normal high breach scenario, and see what that would, the inundation that would result from a catastrophic failure. Again, very low likelihood. We've done risk assessments associated with the dam and found that the probabilities of failure are exceedingly low. However, it is a requirement that we estimate what would happen in those worst cases for planning purposes to inform our emergency action plans and other contingency operations. So this is very interactive. You can zoom in to at a pretty high level. One caution with zooming into like the street level is that there's a lot of assumptions that go into these models and assessments. So I think they should be used with a little bit of caution when you're zooming into the fine detail. I think from a general sense to look at where water might go in one of these worst case events, it's going to give you a pretty good idea. However, just because your location that you're interested in might be right here as opposed to right there, I wouldn't give that too much. I would give it a little bit of buffer than what's shown here.
Ross, this is Christy. Can you explain the different shades of color?
I can, yeah. So this is a very customizable, and you can get really into the weeds and customize this and show whichever scenario you want. But over here, there's a little paintbrush next to each of the scenarios, and this describes the different colors. So the standard color scheme is these blue different shades, and so the darkest blue purple is over 15 feet of depth, which is typically closest to the river channel. The lighter kind of this blue color is showing 6 to 15 feet of inundation. The lighter blue, I guess, is shown like in this color is 2 to 6 feet of inundation, and then this very pale blue is modeled inundation of less than 2 feet. So there's different. There's also other different ways to show the inundation. This is in metric scale, so in meters, this orange color being 0.3 to 1 meter. And this is kind of gives an indication of whether it's passable by a car or not, or by a high clearance trucks. Anything 2 to 3 meters is not going to be passable with any type of vehicle. So there's different ways you can do this. You can even create your own custom scale if you so desire. You have a specific way you want to, but the standard you're going to see is this this blue scale here. It's also possible to change the background layer, so you can change it to an aerial map or a more topographic map. There's a few different options that you can use there. Also, there's some layers that you can pull in for different infrastructure that exists. So if you're interested in schools that might be impacted by this particular scenario, you can pull on that layer, click on that layer so it populates. Those will probably show up better on one of these other base maps. And then also going back to this tab here, the flood hazard zones are also viewable. So if we take off the inundation layer, I believe these should show up. This is the National Flood Insurance Hazard layer. So it's typically showing the 1% flood event, or the 100-year type of flood event. So I'll go back to the presentation here. We have created a fact sheet, which we can, I think we have posted on our website that we can link folks to, and that really just tries to summarize a lot of what we've gone over today in words, and can be used as a reference, as well as has a lot of helpful links in different pages to get more information, either about dams, dam safety, emergency preparedness, emergency management agencies, etc. So I'm going to pause there and maybe pass it back to Dustin to help facilitate any questions and answers we had in the chat there.
Yeah, and just based on the schedule, we had 10 minutes in there. We're happy to stay as long as we need to. I've been monitoring the chat. I didn't see any questions come up yet, but I agree with you, Wyatt. Our public affairs office has taken a creative approach to getting folks interested in what's happening within the system, and include folks into some issues around dam safety. And we want to continue to try to refine and improve on that. So open it up. You can put questions in the chat. Maybe it'd be the easiest way to start it, and we'll cycle it to people so we don't have folks talk over each other. Just pop your name in if you have a question, or a question mark into the chat, and I'll work that way.
Yes, Mel.
So Wyatt's question, what are the main scenarios we would be focusing on and prepping for? So I'll take a stab at this, and then I'll let Ross clean up anything that I get wrong. Wyatt, I mean, in terms of preparing, I know that you prepare over an entire range of events. We are looking, from an emergency action plan standpoint, at something that that involves kind of an abnormal operating condition, whether it be a high flow or an issue with a piece of infrastructure. So, Ross has got a picture of Foster Dam up on the screen now, and you see one of our spillway gates up and elevated out of the way, where you have those kinds of mechanical, electrical, structural components. You start to think about flows that would exceed bankful up to flood stage and be kind of ready for the communication that would come for that. What if you received a call, or if the county received a call from the Corps of Engineers saying we have, an above bankful condition based on an abnormal, operating event? Those are the kinds of things that are probably, I guess to the extent that you can prepare around them, you're trying to think through, how do we communicate based on something that is out of the norm, what people should do? I think back to the flood of 2019, and, we went from, fairly normal operations on a Sunday to being in the Lane County Emergency Operations Center on a Sunday night. It wasn't a dam safety emergency, but we knew we were going to have a high flow event. And folks are saying, well, how do we communicate out where people go, and how do we draw the right polygon around a map to get that notification out? So those areas that are in immediate proximity to the river, kind of working your way out, thinking about a range of high flow events, that would be, one place for you to start thinking of. And I saw some of your comments, in the chat around, areas that you would be directing people to, or, directing people away from being facilitated by this type of mapping. But really the idea is that this information would be valuable to you over the entire range of events, whether it be an issue of mechanical, electrical, or structural, or something, catastrophic like, a significant flood or seismic event. Ross, anything to add there?
I think actually I would add one thing maybe would be the as far as a scenario that might want to look at would be the max high non-breach. So this would be the kind of the maximum flood that if there was a very, very large rain event or subsequent storms back to back to back, and the flood storage behind the dams was exceeded, what's the maximum release that the spillway could make in that non-breach scenario? So just a very extreme flood event. So this is for Green Peter what that max high non-breach inundation looks like. And so, definitely less dramatic than the breach scenario, which I had up earlier. Still certainly some impacts to some of the communities downstream, but a lot less, a lot more manageable. So this gives you an idea, I think, in some of those larger flood event scenarios where water might go. And I think one thing I'll point out here, this is showing for Green Peter what that max high non-breach looks like. Because there's two different tributaries coming into Foster Dam, the non-breach flows associated with Foster are a little bit more significant. So this is really showing if both forks of the river were at that maximum precipitation level where water might go and the depths associated with that. So those would be two of the scenarios that I would look at.
Ross, a request to just show again how you do the traffic projections, and pull the paintbrush up and show how you would overlay traffic onto that kind of flood event.
Yeah, it is a pretty small little icon here. It's this paintbrush, and so this you can choose the different raster, they call it, classification, and then you hit save, and that should apply the different colors to that same scenario. Great
questions, Wyatt. Thank you. Other questions from the group? If not, or you just want to stick for a minute, we'll hang out here for a few more minutes. I also want to make sure, I know it's probably in the middle of a work day for a number of you to be respectful of your time, but we'll hang out here. And if there are things that come to mind after you have feel free to reach back to us. I know Christy, we'll figure out a way to make the recorded presentation today available so that you can share that out with the folks that weren't able to attend today. Before we close, and while we just kind of wait to see if other folks have any questions, Ross, anything you want to say in conclusion?
No, just thank you for your attendance today and attention, and hopefully answered some questions for you. And Dustin, myself, and the rest of the team happy to follow up if something comes up or in the future. But just want to say thanks for your attention and participation today.
Thanks. And Ross, Joe asked for just to maybe go back to the map quick to show travel time in scenarios.
So right now the travel times aren't available on the NID. There's some challenges, technical challenges with showing that on the NID. They are on the hard copy maps, so the emergency management agencies have those in the map books. However, those are not included on the map. And I don't have them off the top of my head to say out loud right now.
Joe, I do know that what you're talking about is, if access to those hard copies and CDs that we put out prior, you do have, those rough estimations of travel time based on the similar scenarios.